This is the Beyond Belief Sobriety podcast, where we discuss topics of interest to people who seek a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. This episode was originally recorded on January 30th of 2021, and it features a conversation I had with AJ, who started a secular AA meeting in New Jersey. In this episode, he will share his story and talk about his group has evolved since it started. Well, hello, AJ, and welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. It's so good to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. I've been following the AA Beyond Belief page for years now. There's been a lot of inspiration from that page, from this podcast, and from the secular community that for me. So I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. So, as you know, what I like to do is start with your story and learn about what, brought you into recovery, your impressions of AA, how you got involved with secular AA meetings and starting one. And, we'll just let a conversation flow from there. Would you mind starting off with that?
Sounds good. So my name is AJ. I am an alcoholic. I got sober. My sober date is September 14th, 2012. I have a sponsor named Mike. He has a sponsor named Kevin. My sponsor and his sponsor are both, theists. They believe in God, and yet we still have a wonderful and loving relationship. And I do think that is possible and helpful, honestly. We are part of a broader community. So to get started with my story, grew up in Maryland for 9 years, and then my family moved to Rochester, New York, which is where I really spent my formative years. I kind of attribute that move to some of my feelings. I don't, I do believe that this is a disease, but I think that there are events that happen in our lives that shape our lives, and milestone events. And that move for me was a milestone event. I spent my time from when I was about 9 until I was about 13 or 14 being very sad and depressed and lonely. And what got me out of that was two things. One was getting involved in theater in my schooling, and the other was getting involved with a group of people who were kind of rebels. And I grew up in the 90s grunge era, had my long hair and flannel. Actually, I wore an army jacket everywhere. We were smokers. We didn't give we were rebels without a cause. And, I started smoking cigarettes at a young age. And then I moved from there. Once you're doing one, bad thing, sometimes you move on to other things. And I did. I started smoking a little pot. Then never really liked it. I smoked it because, I hate to be a stereotypical teenager, but more everybody else was doing it, so I did it too. But pot really made me anxious and uncomfortable. And it wasn't until one night. So I lived in a little suburb of Rochester called Henrietta, and there was a McDonald's there that on Friday nights we would go there and hang out because we could smoke indoors. And if you know anything about Rochester, it's very snowy, very cold, and so during the winter, you find things to do indoors. So we could smoke our cigarettes indoors, but we could also step outside. And in this case, we had found someone who would sell us alcohol. So I drank my first 40 ounce of alcohol and got drunk for my first time. And I loved it. My parents had given me sips of wine here and there. We would be able to have half a glass in Thanksgiving, and that, I didn't get any feeling from that. It wasn't until I did this and I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I want. And then about, hour later, I started getting the spins, and then I threw up. But after I threw up, I felt better. And I said, okay, this is what I want to do now. I just need to learn how to do it better. And after that, I drank any chance that I got. It wasn't that often because most of my friends were pot smokers. Every once in a while we would do some acid, but we were, they smoked pot. And it was much easier to get pot than alcohol. We couldn't find a lot of people who would sell alcohol to us, and nobody had a fake ID. So, and honestly, they didn't care that much about it. I did. It wasn't really, I didn't really start drinking in earnest until I was in my 20s, and people started serving me, and then I started drinking every day when I turned 21 and had an ID. So kind of in that time, I had my first couple of geographic moves. Besides the one from Maryland to Rochester, I moved from Rochester to Ohio for a year, went to Ohio State, dropped out and moved to Denver. Just packed up my stuff. I had some friends there and moved in with them and spent 2 years there. And in Denver, I turned 21 the night after I arrived in Denver. And really, I was, outside of any supervision of anybody. And, I said to myself, okay, I can do whatever I want. What I wanted to do was drink. And I did every night. I worked in the food service industry. I waited tables. Waiting tables is a good way to make quick cash. You can, sustain yourself, and you can also go out and party with folks every night. And that's what I did. I was out every night. I wasn't in school anymore, so I didn't really have any responsibilities, and that's what I could do. I could work, work full time and party full time. I also picked up somewhat of a cocaine habit in Denver, and eventually just decided to move away and move to St. Louis with my mom. So I was in St. Louis for several years. I like St. Louis too. I'm actually a Cardinals fan. I know that's I picked up different sports teams as I moved around the country. But in St. Louis, it was definitely the Cardinals. A couple of things are happening to me in St. Louis. One, I'm trying to kind of put my life together because I felt listless. I was involved in my own spiritual journey, which for me meant starting to. So my mother lived in St. Louis at the time. My mother is an Episcopal priest, and she was a priest at a small church in St. Louis. So I started getting active in her church and getting involved in her church because I felt like I wanted that. I felt like I wanted that direction, and I actually had an eye towards becoming an Episcopal priest myself. Just to go on a small tangent about Episcopalianism for anybody in your anybody who is not particularly aware of what it is. People call it Catholic light sometimes. All of the ceremony, half the guilt. For the most part, they are not stuck in dogmatic thinking.
Yeah. It seems to be a more intellectual type of an intellectual type of a belief system, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are even Episcopalians who will say that they don't believe in the resurrection.
Yeah.
They believe in.
What's interesting, to interrupt you on this, but when I was, so I grew up without any religion whatsoever, knew nothing about it. And when I was in my early 20s, when my drinking was getting bad, I started looking for an answer, and I went to religion. And to understand religion better, I took a class at a community college on the New Testament as literature. It was taught by an Episcopalian priest, and he taught it as literature, not as religious dogma. And I swear to God, when you study the Bible as literature, you really realize it's a man-made document. It's not supernatural. And it was like, this guy kind of knew that, and I had this impression that this Episcopal priest knew that this is just, this isn't magic. I had that. And then fast forward many years later, our Free Thinkers group actually meets at an Episcopalian church here. Not now because of COVID, but yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of familiar with them, and I kind of liken them a little bit to the Unitarians more than I would any other type of strict dogmatic religion.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. It's, especially lay people, you'll get all sorts of different theologies in there. People like my mom, my mother will say that she absolutely believes in the resurrection, believes, some of the magic things, the things that I would call magic, the things
right.
that I think
it's probably an insulting way of putting it, but that's kind of,
I don't know if my mom's going to listen to this. And, at the end of the day, I am an atheist today.
Right.
And, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I do think that, it's impossible to look at the Bible and scripture as anything but man-made stories and myths and, not even very well written. Right. But, at the time, as I was kind of trying to develop this spiritualness in myself, I was, trying to look at it with this academic eye, just like you said. There was an Episcopal priest who looked at an academic eye, and typically Anglican theology, which the Episcopal Church is the Church of England in America. Anglican theology is very much, the scripture is, one part of what we study, but we don't look at it the way, for example, the fundamentalists do. This is not a fundamentalist religion. This is not, we don't live by strictly by the literal word of the Bible. So I was able to kind of branch out and meld what really was secular humanism with, with Anglican theology. And, it was somewhat complementary. So all of that is happening, but at the same time, I'm not drinking less. I'm isolating more. I'm drinking alone more. But I am making friends out there. Eventually, I had been without a car for a while. I eventually get a car, and working in a restaurant, and shortly after I had gotten a car, I got into an accident by myself. Nobody else was involved, but I got my first DUI. And through that process was my first introduction to AA.
Okay. Was that in St. Louis? I'm sorry. Are you still in St. Louis during this time? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So still in St. Louis during this. I was about 23, I think, 23 or 24 at the time. So I go into first they send me to what was called a weekend intervention program. I'm sure that there's a bunch of different. Well, you're in the state of Missouri, so they still call it that there. Where essentially my BAC was high enough that they said you had to go to intervention for this. So that was, going to a hotel for a weekend and being given a lot of education about what the disease of alcoholism is. And actually, it worked for me. It didn't stop me, but that told me essentially that was the first time I went into a place and they said, not you are an alcoholic. They said, this is what alcoholism is. And these are the symptoms of alcoholism. And, these are the kinds of things that alcoholics say and do. And if you do these things, then you might be an alcoholic. So it wasn't like, trying to force feed this stuff to you. It was just showing you a lot of, this, it was what you do in the rooms. You have people talk about their experiences and if you're going to listen and identify, then you're probably going to resonate. And it did. And I walked out of there saying, I am an alcoholic and I have a problem. And I did go to a couple of AA meetings. And it was fine. It wasn't, it wasn't wonderful, but it was fine. And then I just kind of let myself talk myself out of it. I was in my 20s. Everybody that I knew, all we did was drink. So I basically talked myself out. I didn't try to get a sponsor. Didn't try to do any of that stuff. And so I continued basically doing the same thing that I was doing before, getting the same results. Eventually, I did meet my first wife, I've since divorced her. Obviously, that's why I call her first. Met my first wife. Kind of did a little bit of more moving around. The drinking was a problem with my wife. One anecdote that I do like to bring up with my ex is, this one morning, and there were just so many ups and downs with us, with her getting pissed at the amount that I would drink, but not knowing how alcoholism works, and not knowing that I couldn't moderate, that it wasn't possible. And so one morning, I kind of get up and she's yelling at me because I drank the night before. And when I drank, I would, snore more loudly, and I would flail around in my sleep, apparently. And she really hated it. And she was yelling at me, and I wanted to, but did not say. What I wanted to say was, why don't you just get it? Just get that this is what I want to do. This is who I am. And just, this is how I want to drink. And if you would be okay with that, then we would be fine. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And, eventually we got divorced. Honestly, it wasn't meant to be for more reasons than just that I was an alcoholic. But, we got divorced, and then after we got divorced, I started, drinking the way that I wanted to drink for a couple of months. And then during that time, after my wife and I got divorced, I started finally saying to myself, in terms of spirituality, I don't believe this stuff. I was getting more and more skeptical. More and more just, so much of this doesn't make sense to me. And I've been spending all this time fighting it. What if I just give into it and be an atheist?
Yeah. I had the same experience. It was kind of a slow, kind of a journey where I just started doubting. I started reading a little bit here, a little bit there. And I kind of came to the conclusion, that's exactly what I am, actually. Yeah. And it was, for me, actually, it was kind of when I came to the realization that I was an atheist, it was kind of scary at first. I didn't even like the word, and to hear the word applied to me at first just seemed like uncomfortable. Now I'm totally okay with it, but at first it was a very uncomfortable thing, and a lot of it had to do with just the way that society views an atheist, and also that I was so embedded into AA culture for so long. That was part of my story anyway. But yeah. So I can relate to kind of come to that conclusion over kind of a period of time, just having these nagging doubts and thoughts, and then finally realizing and embracing it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. And I mean, same kind of fears for me that you had. Again, I wasn't raised in a tradition where anybody was saying you're going to go to hell for this. Right. So I wasn't worried about my soul. But I was worried about, I was worried that my mother would stop loving.
Sure, right.
I was worried that that was my biggest worry. My mother and I had always had a very close relationship, and it still has driven somewhat of a wedge between us. But unfortunately, it is it's something that has to be there. She doesn't say it, but I do kind of think that for her. She always liked the fact that I was kind of on board with the religion, and when I basically came out as an atheist, she felt betrayed. So that kind of hasn't stopped. But we are close. We talk every week. We live fairly close to each other, and we love each other.
And what's interesting too is you actually now you have a sponsor who is a believer, right? And I think that's kind of important in a way, because we do live in a world where people have all sorts of belief systems. And if you can learn to speak the language of someone else, it just makes you that more valuable to the world anyway. And obviously, it's like, just because I personally have these views of religion for myself personally, it doesn't mean I don't have any respect for other people's beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that you raised that. I have respect for people's beliefs that I can respect. I don't respect Scientologists' beliefs.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a limit.
Yeah. I respect people who have a belief that we that all people have inherent worth and that we're worthy of love. I respect forgiveness. I respect things like that. I don't respect beliefs that are anti-gay, anti-LGBT.
Right. Correct. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And unfortunately, it does exist. So yeah.
So
anybody that wants to push their view on someone else is where I kind of draw a line to.
Yeah, exactly. I want, freedom of religion is important. I don't think that we should be repressing anything, but at the same time, freedom from religion is extremely important. And that's kind of always been my stance, whether I was religious or not religious. And frankly, it's my mother's stance. She is a big advocate of the separation of church and state. And, there are those religious folks out there who also understand the limits of religion and for whom religion is personal, and they'll talk about it, but, they're not there to say, you must believe as I believe. So I was kind of descending, still in St. Louis, becoming more of an active alcoholic after my divorce, and I was allowed to, kind of drink the way that I wanted to. Also going through this spiritual transformation from, being an Episcopalian to being an atheist and calling myself an atheist. And it's around that time I was working at a place in St. Louis where I was a DJ, a mobile DJ. So I worked for a place. We did mostly weddings. I did not do, by the way, I always like to say this. I did not do the electric slide. I did not do anything like that. We tried to hold ourselves back from that and be, we're the classy DJs who are not going to pull grandma up onto the dance floor. Funny hats on her. So. But it was fun, and it was also, if you're an active alcoholic, it's a great job. You get free drinks all night. Sure. You do have to drive after that, but that was a huge part of my story. I drove almost every night drunk.
Me too.
And it's awful. And unfortunately, there were plenty of people in St. Louis who did that too. It's not a commuter town. There were plenty of drunks on the road at all times. I'm very fortunate that I only got one DUI when I was in St. Louis, maybe I would have recovered quicker if I had gotten more, but it's unfortunate, but there it is. Anyway, so I was working for this company. And my boss takes us to Costa Rica as it was an incentive thing for us. We all did a good job. We were very productive. He took us to Costa Rica, and I met my current wife there. We just we hit it off. She was living in New Jersey, where I am now. And, I didn't have anything tying me down in St. Louis anymore. My mother had since moved away to go to a different church. And, as much as I liked my job, I said, I'm going to give it a shot. I really love this woman. And I moved to northern New Jersey. And during that time, I really hid the extent of my alcoholism. But, after a while, it has to come out. She was the only one with a job. I didn't have a job for quite a while. And I was spending her money on booze and hiding the amount of money that I was spending.
Right.
And doing something, she had her own little kind of liquor cabinet under the sink where she just assumed that stuff was always there. Well, I was, waiting for her to go to bed at night. I would get up and go drink and, drink down that liquor. And then when she was at work the next day, I would go to the store and buy liquor to replace that liquor. Getting into that kind of shenanigans, which is just, it's sick behavior, but, and at the time I realized that it was sick behavior. I was, and I went through that for a while and, was not necessarily a daily drinker, but, would go in spurts and then, say, okay, I'm going to stop drinking for a week. And then, maybe it would last, maybe it wouldn't. And eventually it got to the point where with a lot of us, it does. It came to a climax for me. I actually it was one night, I was drinking, and then I went out to I was drinking. I took some Ambien on top of the drinking because I said, I want to be able to fall asleep later. And then I went to the store to pick up cigarettes. And on my way back from the store, I blacked out. I was driving her car, blacked out and totaled her car, just literally 20 feet outside of the apartment building where we lived. And she got a call from BMW saying, your car's been in an accident. She said, you're crazy. I'm in bed right now. And she said, no, it's your car's been in an accident. And she looked outside and saw that there were a bunch of cop cars there. And she's really glad she's met you at this point. Yeah. So, I mean, we had been together for, I want to say almost 2 years at this point. So there was some commitment there, and, but that was it. It was put up or shut up time. And, so, the first thing that I knew to do was go to AA. And that's what I did. I went to my first AA meeting since St. Louis. Went to my first, and this time I said, okay, I got to find a sponsor. And so I shared. I opened up and shared and said, I need to find a sponsor. Can someone please help me find a sponsor? In northern New Jersey, where we are, I was in the Fort Lee area at that time. There's a big community, and we have intergroup books that have meeting lists. I never found a meeting out of that book before. I always went to the website, but what they did, we passed around the book and we put, sober contacts on the back of the book. And I called those numbers. I have put my name on so many of those books and never gotten a call from it, but I actually did call those numbers and spoke to some folks. And one of the first guys on the list is the guy who's my sponsor now. I went to 2 meetings a day for the most part for the first few months. Obviously my wife kept me because she's my wife now. At the time she was my girlfriend, but we got married in 2016. And so just talking through a little bit of my sober journey, I went to 2 meetings a day. I did all the things that they told me to, but I didn't pray. I actually did try to pray. I would say the serenity prayer every once in a while because I felt like it calmed me and centered me. I did too. Now, actually for me, I did the praying thing for a while until I realized that for me, what happened is I was a younger guy and I just kind of conformed to what people were doing. So I prayed almost in this obsessive compulsive way where that if I didn't pray, damn it, I just would go crazy and have to go back and start all over again. But I just did it because I did it, I guess. But then eventually I stopped because I really realized at some level this is bullshit. But I never told anybody that I wasn't praying because it was such a big deal at the AA meetings I went to that you'd get down on your knees and pray every day that I wasn't going to raise my hand and say, oh, I don't do that. I just wasn't going to do that. But the serenity prayer, even to this day, I will still find myself reciting it because, it's kind of like a mantra for me. It's not like I'm praying to a deity or anything, but I honestly do find some value in it for me still to this day. And it might be habit or whatever, but I do use that as well. Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that we do now in my meeting, it's not my meeting, it's it's everyone else's meeting. But the way that we chose to end that meeting is saying the serenity statement instead of the serenity prayer, which is just the same thing, but you say, today I seek the serenity.
Right. Right. No deity has to give it to you.
Exactly. We are seekers and we're seeking serenity. So kind of getting around to that, like I said, my wife hung on to me. I did, 90 and 90. I did more than 90 and 90. I found a ton of value in the rooms of AA and speaking to people. And I was also able to separate the God stuff from the rest of the stuff. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, I can't make that separation. It's just, I hear God and I walk away.
Could you see the action underneath the everything through the steps and so forth?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, a huge part of recovery is service. And the action, yes, I could see the action. For me, it wasn't any of the words that I was saying. It was the action of, making the meeting, of picking up folks on my way to the meeting, of, being a greeter, of cleaning up after the meeting, of making coffee, especially, and so one other anecdote that I love is one of the meetings that I would make in Fort Lee. There's this Thursday men's meeting in Fort Lee, and my sponsor said, okay, next time we have a business meeting, I'm going to vote you in as coffee maker. And I said, well, I don't have money to go get the, he said, don't worry about that. I will, give you the money. They're going to reimburse you anyway, but I'll give you $20 now, so that you can, go pick up all the cookies and coffee for the meeting. And that's going to be your responsibility. And the responsibility part of it was huge for me. Learning that there were people who were depending on me and that I could follow through. And it's also, it's fairly low stakes. It's just, I did have one of the old timers say, this isn't the right kind of cream or, so you get some complaints, but for the most part, you're doing something with very low stakes, but people are going to be disappointed if they don't get their coffee and cookies. Right. So that taught me some responsibility, and it gave me, it gave me a good feeling that people are depending on me and I'm doing a job. And, when I first came to the rooms, I felt like shit. And I am a huge believer in one of the things that we need when we get into the rooms is forgiveness. Because we feel so bad. Not that, I didn't need forgiveness for being an alcoholic because, I came to realize really quickly that this is a disease and that, or disorder that I had, very little control over. What I needed forgiveness for was, totaling my girlfriend's car and stealing, essentially stealing money from her for a couple of years and, really feeling, like for the first time, like I was the bad guy and everything. And, folks said to me, my grand sponsor, at one of my first meetings was running the meeting and I was crying, saying exactly what I just said. For the first time, I feel like a bad guy. And he said, AJ, when we come into the rooms, it's like we have a huge target on our back. And if you keep coming, then slowly and slowly, the target will get smaller and smaller. And it's true. Nowadays I have an equal relationship with my wife. She hasn't been able to work during COVID, and I have. In my sobriety, I went to law school and, got my law degree. And now, thank you. And now I'm a practicing lawyer. And the other thing that I did was I started a secular meeting.
Right. What motivated you to do that, by the way?
What motivated me to do that was coming into meetings regularly and hearing plenty of people who were saying that they didn't believe in God. Hearing plenty of people say, well, I think I might be able to do AA if it weren't for all the God stuff. And finally getting, sick of hearing all that and sick of me saying somebody should do something about that. And I actually did something. Our meeting is also in an Episcopal church. In Fort Lee, there is this particular church that hosts an AA meeting every night of the week, and we were able to to find a time slot in which we were able to do the meeting 8:00 on Tuesday nights. And, I just, at first I just put it out through word of mouth. I said, I'm starting this meeting. I think that this is going to be a good thing. I got support from my grand sponsor, and my sponsor. They said, That's a great idea. We definitely see a need for that in this community, and you should definitely do it. And so, the first meeting, I think I had my two sponsees and maybe one other person there. And then, the next meeting I had about 5 people, and then 7, and more people heard about it. And more people started coming. And, then I went to intergroup, and the way that intergroup works in our area is if you want to get intergroup is the group that puts out the meeting books, and said that if you want to get listed as a meeting, you have to be a functioning meeting for like 3 months, and then you come 1 month and you kind of introduce yourself, and then you come the next month and intergroup will vote you in or not. And it has been very rare that they rejected anybody. We actually did have them reject right before I came in. They rejected a meeting that was using non-AA approved literature. And
so is the vote by all the groups, the representatives that go to intergroup, or is it just by the people who run the office and sit on the board of the intergroup?
All the representatives.
Wow.
So all the delegates.
Oh my goodness.
All the delegates vote.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm the intergroup rep from my Friday night non-secular meeting. And, because through my experience with my Tuesday night meeting, I said, I kind of want to get involved in this. And nobody was sending anybody from the Friday night meeting. So I said I'd like to do this and got involved. And it was really it's been a great experience. There was a little friction about us being a secular meeting.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, especially if they didn't like the group that was using outside literature. I wonder what that was all about. I wonder what they were using.
Yeah, no, they were. I forget what it is. It's that it's one of those like first principles or real major big book banging folks that are also very. It's very God centered.
Okay, okay, funny.
But so we made some compromises for that because we didn't want them to say you're not using AA approved literature. So one thing that we do at the beginning of our meetings is we make a statement that we endorse the AA 12 steps and the secular forms, but we do not read any step.
Yeah, that's smart. We don't either. We don't read any steps at our meeting. It's not necessary. At one time we did actually have the actual original steps hanging on the wall of our meeting, but we had to take them down because they were actually started to offend people.
Listen, that's a thing though.
Yeah.
I mean, people come into the rooms and they see those banners and they see God on
all over the place, and the real masculine language and all that kind of stuff. It was offensive to some people.
Yeah, and that's one thing I knew I didn't want at the meeting. Essentially what I did to start the meeting was I looked up and found what a lot of us call the secular preamble. And then I added, a few extra stuff on the end about, the 12 steps. I didn't want what happened in Toronto to happen to us. And went to intergroup. The way that we led the meeting.
So you didn't want that drama. I kind of wanted that when I started our meeting, but I didn't get it. They're like,
well, yeah. I expected there to be a little bit more drama than there was. Thankfully, we're in a loving community. I heard plenty of people say, kind of behind their backs, saying, "Oh, those secular people."
Right.
But at the end of the day, anybody who actually comes into one of our meetings. Now, I will say this, and one of our regulars at the meeting is a great older guy. He's one of the guys who inspired me to keep coming and to start this meeting. He's a guy with 30 years or more of sobriety. Was never worried about saying in a meeting that he doesn't believe in God. And he came to our meeting, and I will admit this, it was early on. And it was, I just decided, hey, I want to talk about the We Agnostics chapter of the big book, and it was almost an hour-long hate fest. People talking about how much they didn't like it, including my opening remarks in leading the meeting. And that I've thought better of this, but I think I had to kind of get it out of my chest, off my chest. But what this guy, this long-timer said was, I've gone to secular meetings in Florida, and I really liked it. Because they don't sit around patting themselves on the back all day about how they're atheists, and I'm kind of feeling like this group is getting that way, and I took that criticism.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, but the guy, come on, man, the guy is this like his first meeting, and he's making this judgment, But that's what people do. I mean, they make a judgment of your group from the first meeting they attend. And if one guy is bashing God at that meeting, you're a bunch of God bashers.
Yeah, and we got that. We got that from some folks. I will say this guy, he even though he criticized us, he kept coming back, and he started leading the. He took his turns during COVID. Leading Zoom meetings for quite a while. So it's not like But no, I mean, listen, I didn't want it to be an hour-long hate fest.
I hear you. And you know what? And it does happen sometimes. And I would cringe at the meetings where it did happen, because you would have people at a certain stage in the group's life where that was really important to get that off their chest. And some people were a lot more vocal than other people. But yeah, I would just cringe. I was like, God, can we just please get through this? Especially if I saw someone in the meeting I'd never seen before and we're going on one of these tangents. But I can tell you, over time, that became less and less of an issue to where it's almost non-existent now.
Yeah. And, so in March, our first meeting was the first Tuesday in March. It will be 3 years ago this March. And, now we've just been meeting via Zoom. We typically have between 20 and 30 people at any Zoom meeting.
Has your group held together pretty well during this time?
It has. We had a couple of folks who went out but came back. We've had, the main core of the meeting makes the meeting every week. And, I make the meeting. I just took another turn as chairperson. And so that makes me make the meeting every week. But, I had a trial a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, I should say, and wasn't able to make the meeting. And, there are times when I'm not able to make the meeting, but I do for the most part. And yeah, they've held together very well. We get folks from the Beyond Belief page joining us every once in a while.
Okay, so you get people from outside of your area then. Yeah,
which is great. We've met some folks from British Columbia. We've met some folks from Ireland. We get folks coming. There's actually one woman who has become a regular at our meeting, even though she lives in Georgia, and which is fantastic. It's like she lives in a very rural area of Georgia. Her meetings are, and she's gay, and her meetings are, not particularly welcoming to that. And, we are really happy to have be there and be open arms, which, she's one of the main reasons why I am going to, advocate for a webcam at every meeting and having, once we are able to meet live again,
kind of have a hybrid type meeting.
Yeah. I think that, I want our meeting to be open to as many people as possible. Because there are folks in rural parts of Georgia and Alabama.
Absolutely. And they don't have anyone else that they can meet up with. They're kind of in an isolated area. And in that part of the country, I mean, it's really the religion and what church you go to is really important.
Yeah. And, thankfully, New Jersey isn't like that. And so we were able, and I do want to kind of give some props to, in New Jersey, before we started our meeting, there was a long-time meeting, agnostic meeting in Jersey City. But unfortunately, because they just happen to be in a bad area for parking, and fortunately, because Jersey City happens to be a very liberal area, that wasn't as much of a need for a secular meeting because people, were more secular there. In our area, when I grew, so I owe a lot to that group. And thankfully in our area, when I planted my meeting, other folks said, "Oh, we really like this. We want more of this." And so now there's a Sunday night meeting in Lodi, New Jersey. And there is I believe there's a Wednesday night meeting. There is a Thursday night meeting, I think. And they're all meeting via Zoom right now. But, we're getting to the point soon where we're going to have meetings in our secular meetings every night of the week in our area. Yeah. So, and it has been, and really the one thing I really want to drive home with respect to our meeting, with respect to the secular movement, is I do not think that we have to be at odds with the religious.
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree. And I get a little tired of the Facebook group when people want to debate the God, no God, the bad AA, good AA, all that kind of crap. Is whatever works for anybody. Besides, I'm a firm believer that what we do, whether you believe or not believe in God, whether you look at the steps in a secular way or a non-secular way, the bottom line, the bottom actions that you're doing are essentially the same. You're dealing with the same problem and you're doing pretty much the same things. You're just explaining it differently. And whatever it is that motivates you, you're attributing that motivation to something different maybe. But otherwise, we have far more in common than not. And if you ever get involved like in service outside of the group, you go to an area assembly or your district or whatever, you don't even talk about any of the other stuff. It's all pretty much, nuts and bolts of what we're going to do to help people.
Exactly. And that's at the end of the day, it is about saving lives. And I started the meeting not to say, AA should be secular. No. I started an AA secular meeting so that people who are uncomfortable with certain parts of AA will feel comfortable and will actually come in and participate. And we have folks who, the Tuesday night meeting is the only meeting that they'll make. And I do encourage people, please, do go to, some of these other meetings. It's not that horrible. They're not going to make you do anything that you want to do. Frankly, some people just don't feel comfortable with that. And some people have suffered major trauma.
That's the thing. A lot of people have suffered trauma from religion.
And I don't want to expose them to that and say, you need to force yourself to do something that you don't want to do.
That's a very real thing. We actually had a couple of people like that. One young woman I remember in particular, though, Erica, she was traumatized. She grew up in a really fundamentalist family, and she just experienced all sorts of trauma tied to religion. And so when she went to AA initially, she would re-experience that trauma. So she went to our group, and then she became very comfortable with the steps and some of the literature that she found and working them in a secular way. She actually wrote up her own version of the steps. But what happened to her, which I found really interesting, is she stopped going to our meeting and she started going to these traditional meetings where she used to be uncomfortable. And she spoke openly as an atheist, and she was embraced by these groups. And she's still sober and happy today. But she had to go through that period of time where she really needed a safe place where she could find her own way of expressing her recovery in a safe place so that she could eventually do it in the greater AA world.
I absolutely love that. And one of our first regular members, very similar. He came into the rooms. He had kind of originally come into AA and was going to traditional meetings, and then he was kind of leveling out a little bit, and then saw our meeting, and it really reinvigorated him. And he started going back to those other meetings and sharing his experience, strength, and hope as an atheist.
Isn't that something else?
Yeah,
I like that.
And, basically, essentially saying, we get to participate as well. And you're going to find some value in the participation of atheists in your group, just like you value the participation of the theists in your group. All of these perspectives are needed in order for people to come in and stay sober.
We've really come a long way integrating into the greater community, our secular meetings, integrating into the regular AA community. And another thing that's helping that right now is COVID, because more and more people are finding these meetings now that it's not like going to be that unusual for people to know that there's such a thing as a meeting where you don't pray.
Yeah, exactly. And that's thankfully not a ton came out of 2020 that was great, but and especially not a ton came out of COVID that was great. But the wider community that we've brought together through Zoom meetings and through video meetings has been phenomenal. And I've heard that from so many people, saying it's been great since COVID started, that I've found all of these secular meetings. And we're connecting together in a worldwide community. And yeah, I do think that the traditional AA folks are looking at it and saying, okay, this is a good thing. There are always going to be people,
individual people. There will be individual people, but most groups as a whole, and definitely the General Service Office and the General Service Conference, they don't have a problem with it. And around here, we have secular meetings in Kansas City. We have secular meetings in St. Louis. So both sides of the state, and there's no problem. Totally integrated into it. In fact, the St. Louis meetings are great. If you ever go back to St. Louis, you should check it out sometime. They meet in an old, I can't remember what part of town it is, but it's an old building. It's just really,
it's the Central West End that they meet. I looked it up because I had a friend in St. Louis who was looking to find a secular meeting or something. He was having issues. And
yep, you're right. It's in an Alamo Club.
Yep.
In an old building, and it's beautiful. It's really an interesting place. A lot of history.
Yeah, I would love to go there if I do make it back to St. Louis again. I still have friends there. I still have loved ones there, so it would be a treat to be able to do that. I love getting the chance to go to any new meetings, anywhere in the country, but especially getting to see other secular meetings. Although, more and more, as we were talking about earlier, secular meetings are just, tend to be the same as traditional meetings, except, we don't talk about, God. And it really works out. Although I still like to say that our Tuesday night meetings, sometimes we tend to have, people tend to feel that a lot of the shares are more heartfelt and from the heart. And sometimes we have more kind of original topics that we talk.
So. I think that one reason for that is there's less of a tendency to want to conform to what the norm of the group is. I just say that from my own experience as one who did conform for so long, that was the one thing I noticed when I stopped going to my old traditional meeting, and where I stopped conforming there and had some backlash, to then going to a meeting where I didn't even have to worry about what anyone else thought about what I believed or didn't believe. And I could just be whoever I was. It was a huge freedom.
Yeah. And I think that freedom is what I think keeps a lot of folks coming. I had another old timer who had been around in the room for quite a while. He has, a couple of decades of sobriety. And when we first started this meeting, he just expressed this kind of joy that is, it was just wonderful to hear from somebody essentially saying that I finally get to express myself in a meeting in a way that I've never been able to do before. And, that's what the secular community brings for AA. It gives us the opportunity to give people the chance to be who they are. It's a freedom that you don't get everywhere, even in your regular life, but especially for a lot of atheists and agnostics in AA who feel that they, who just feel uncomfortable sharing that part of themselves and feel that others won't relate to them. A secular meeting gives them the chance to do that. So I'm very happy to have been able to start. And frankly, like I said earlier, when I started this meeting, I thought of it as my meeting. It is not my meeting anymore. It is, I deliberately said, I don't want to be the chairperson because
exactly. Yeah. That's so gratifying to watch the meeting carry on, whether you do or not. Quite frankly, since COVID, I have not been going to meetings at my home group. The group is doing great. It's doing great without me. So that's fine. I like it that way.
Absolutely. It should be able to sustain without me. And like I said, other meetings are cropping up, and there's a real community
Yeah.
in northern New Jersey. So I'm
That's
really
super.
happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much, AJ, for coming on. I enjoyed the conversation and learning about your group and learning your story. It's just made my day. So thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
That's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support our podcast with recurring monthly contributions, head on over to patreon.com/beyondbeliefsobriety or become a member of our YouTube channel. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution, then visit our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button. I do appreciate your support. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again real soon with another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety.